Imagine a world where one decision, one unexpected event, or one twist of fate could have completely rewritten the story of humanity. What if the greatest library of the ancient world had never been lost to time, or if monumental empires had endured instead of crumbling into history? These aren't just idle speculations, they're tantalizing glimpses into what might have been, windows into alternate paths our world could have taken. Throughout history, countless moments have shaped the course of civilization, but what if, at a critical juncture, events had turned out differently? From revolutions that reshaped continents to scientific breakthroughs that arrived centuries late or too early, these what-if scenarios hold the power to ignite our imagination and challenge everything we think we know. In this video, we'll uncover 25 pivotal moments where the future of the entire world hung in the balance. As we explore these alternate realities, you'll see just how fragile and fascinating the thread of history truly is. Stay with us, because by the end of this journey, you might just find yourself questioning how different our own world could have been, and perhaps still could be. Now turning to the first scenario, imagine if the Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of ancient knowledge, had not been lost to history. This legendary institution was said to house countless scrolls and manuscripts containing the collective wisdom of ancient civilizations spanning areas like mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and medicine. Its destruction, whether through fire, neglect, or conquest, is often seen as one of humanity's greatest tragedies. But what if it had survived? The knowledge preserved within those walls could have provided humanity with an enormous head start. We might have seen immense advancements in science and technology centuries ahead of their time. Consider this: what if the works of ancient inventors such as Archimedes had been developed into practical technologies during the early centuries? Breakthroughs in medicine might have cured diseases long before they ravaged populations, and mathematical theories could have accelerated the birth of modern physics. Think about how philosophy and governance might have evolved differently, with ancient ideas building upon one another instead of being rediscovered centuries later. A surviving Library of Alexandria might have prevented the stagnation of knowledge often referred to as the Dark Ages, propelling humanity into an earlier version of the Renaissance. In this alternate timeline, humanity could be standing on the shoulders of giants, entering the modern era with far greater understanding, creativity, and innovation. Could this have made us better equipped to tackle the challenges we face today? Perhaps we would already be exploring the stars or living in a world of remarkable peace and prosperity, all thanks to the foresight of ancient scholars whose ideas were never lost. Now turning to the second scenario, imagine a world where the Roman Empire never fell. Known for its vast reach, advanced infrastructure, and sophisticated governance, the Roman Empire unified much of Europe, the Mediterranean, and parts of the Middle East and North Africa. If it had maintained its dominance, the course of history could have been radically different. A unified Europe under Roman rule might have experienced lasting political stability, preventing centuries of fragmentation and feudal conflict. The preservation of Roman roads, aqueducts, and urban planning could have accelerated technological and economic advancement, ensuring the seamless movement of goods, people, and ideas across the empire's territories. The legal systems and administrative practices established by Rome might have continued to evolve, providing a strong foundation for justice and governance that modern nations could still build upon today. Furthermore, the spread of knowledge and cultural exchange facilitated by a stable empire could have prevented the intellectual stagnation of the so-called Dark Ages. With the empire's continuity, the Renaissance, a period of profound cultural and scientific rebirth, might have occurred centuries earlier, fueled by the uninterrupted accumulation of knowledge and innovation. Religiously and culturally, the world might look vastly different as well. The coexistence of multiple faiths under Roman tolerance may have created a more harmonious relationship between diverse cultures, avoiding some of the religious conflicts that later shaped history. Could this alternate timeline have propelled humanity toward an earlier age of enlightenment, setting the stage for technological advancements and global cooperation? Would we find ourselves living in a more interconnected, prosperous, and unified world? The possibilities are both fascinating and endless. Moving forward, let us explore another pivotal moment in history that raises equally compelling questions. Now turning to the third scenario, let us consider a world where the Black Death never occurred. This catastrophic pandemic, which swept across Europe in the 14th century, claimed tens of millions of lives, decimating nearly half of the population in some regions. A world without the Black Death would have unfolded with dramatically different consequences. The immediate impact would likely have been the preservation of a much larger workforce. With fewer labor shortages, agricultural output could have remained stable, avoiding the economic turmoil that racked medieval Europe. This surplus of workers might have accelerated the growth of cities and the development of trade networks, fostering an earlier expansion of commerce and industry. Population growth would have continued uninterrupted, potentially leading to a faster-paced urbanization and the earlier emergence of modern economies. Social hierarchies could have remained more rigid, as the dramatic power shifts from feudal lords to common laborers, prompted by the scarcity of workers, may not have taken place. Additionally, Europe might have avoided the long period of instability and recovery that followed the pandemic, allowing for continuous intellectual and cultural progress. Advances in medicine and public health could have occurred sooner, as the absence of such a widespread crisis might have enabled societies to focus on proactive innovation rather than reactive measures. However, the lack of this shared calamity might also mean that certain social and scientific transformations, sparked by the necessity to adapt to such a disaster, would never have materialized. Would we have seen the same drive to improve sanitation, or the development of new medical practices that arose from combating the effects of the plague? It is intriguing to wonder if this alternative path would have hastened humanity's progress or merely altered its course in unexpected ways. With that in mind, let us now delve into another historical turning point that challenges our perception of what might have been. Now turning to the fourth scenario, imagine a world where the American Revolution ended in failure, with the colonies remaining firmly under British rule. Without the establishment of an independent United States, the global balance of power would look remarkably different. The British Empire, already a dominant force, might have consolidated even greater economic and military strength through its continued control of the American colonies. The wealth and resources derived from the colonies could have further fueled British expansion, perhaps delaying the decline of the empire well into the modern era. The absence of an independent United States would have likely slowed the spread of democratic ideals that inspired revolutions and movements worldwide. Key historical events such as the French Revolution or the wave of independence movements across Latin America might have taken longer to ignite, as the example of a successful rebellion against imperial power would not have existed. Economically, the lack of a sovereign United States might have delayed the industrial and technological revolutions that were accelerated by the nation's rapid growth and innovation. The Industrial Revolution may have centered even more strongly in Britain, but the absence of an American-led global market could have hindered worldwide economic development. Geopolitically, the world would likely have seen a shifted trajectory, with the British Empire maintaining a dominant role in shaping international policies and alliances. Without the United States as a counterbalance, the global political landscape might have remained more Eurocentric, potentially delaying the emergence of multipolar global powers. The cultural implications would also be significant. The unique identity and influence the United States has cultivated through its independence would not have existed in the same form, and the global proliferation of American ideals, innovations, and popular culture might never have taken root. However, it is important to consider whether eventual independence through gradual reform might have led to a less violent transition, potentially setting a different tone for future independence movements around the world. This alternate timeline raises profound questions about the interplay of power, governance, and cultural identity on the global stage. With that exploration in mind, let us now consider another pivotal moment in history that could have rewritten the story of our world. Moving forward, let us explore what might have unfolded if Germany had emerged victorious in World War I. The ramifications of such a triumph would likely have transformed the political, economic, and social dynamics of the 20th century. A German victory could have resulted in a reconfigured European map, with Germany asserting control over vast territories and securing its position as the dominant continental power. The Treaty of Versailles, known for its harsh penalties on Germany after the actual war, would likely have been reversed in this alternate reality, imposing punitive measures on the defeated Allied powers. This could have created long-lasting tensions but also possibly prevented the conditions that led to World War II. Without the need for Germany to seek retribution, the aggressive nationalism and militarization of the mid-20th century might have been avoided altogether. Economically, a victorious Germany might have established trade networks that reinforced its dominance, potentially making it the economic epicenter of Europe. The industrial and technological advancements of the early 20th century might have been led by German innovation, reshaping industries from transportation to communications on a global scale. This could have significantly influenced the pace and nature of modernization worldwide, with Germany setting the tone for industrial powerhouses. Politically, the structure of global alliances and rivalries would have looked drastically different. The collapse of the British and French empires might have been expedited, altering the course of colonial independence movements and possibly leading to a quicker reorganization of global power dynamics. The United States, having joined the war relatively late and under different circumstances, might not have risen as a global superpower to the same extent, with Germany instead becoming the central force shaping international policies and diplomacy. The League of Nations, or its equivalent in this alternate timeline, might have been molded by German ideals and leadership. This could have introduced a fundamentally different approach to conflict resolution and international cooperation in the interwar period. Culturally, the influence of German art, philosophy, and science could have been more pronounced on a global scale. The achievements of German thinkers, scientists, and artists, already substantial in the real timeline, might have gained even greater prominence and shaped global cultural norms. However, it is also necessary to consider whether such dominance might have stifled diversity in thought and governance, creating a more homogenized world order. This scenario opens a window into the complex interplay between power, innovation, and ideology in shaping history. With Germany as the victorious power, the ripple effects on the 20th and 21st centuries would likely have been profound and multifaceted. As we reflect on this alternate trajectory, let us now turn our attention to another pivotal moment that could have redefined our modern world. Now turning to the next pivotal scenario, let us consider a world where the atomic bomb was never invented. The absence of such a destructive weapon would have drastically changed the nature of warfare, diplomacy, and international relations in the modern era. Without the atomic bomb bringing a definitive end to World War II, the conflict may have dragged on for years, relying solely on conventional warfare. This prolonged struggle could have resulted in even greater devastation, both in terms of human lives and infrastructure, as countries continued to exhaust their resources in an effort to achieve victory. The Cold War, a period defined by nuclear deterrence, would likely have taken an entirely different shape without the looming threat of mutually assured destruction. Instead of prioritizing the stockpiling of nuclear weapons, nations might have invested more heavily in conventional military forces, leading to an ongoing arms race of a different kind. The balance of power between the United States and the Soviet Union might have depended on traditional military capabilities and regional influence rather than the threat of nuclear annihilation. This could have resulted in a series of extended proxy wars with no ultimate ceiling on the level of conflict, potentially making the Cold War an even bloodier and prolonged confrontation. In terms of diplomacy, the absence of the atomic bomb might have removed a critical pressure point that forced nations to seek alternatives to full-scale war. The formation of global institutions such as the United Nations could have faced greater challenges in persuading nations to cooperate without the existential threat posed by nuclear weapons. On the other hand, without the fear of instant and total destruction, countries may have felt emboldened to engage in conventional wars, further complicating the efforts to establish lasting peace through negotiation and diplomacy. Technologically, the absence of the atomic bomb might have diverted scientific research and resources toward other fields. The Manhattan Project, which in reality laid the groundwork for advancements in nuclear energy and physics, could have been redirected to other areas such as renewable energy, space exploration, or biotechnology. This alternate focus might have accelerated progress in these domains, potentially altering the trajectory of scientific innovation in the latter half of the 20th century. Culturally, the public perception of war, peace, and power might have been entirely different in a world without nuclear weapons. The atomic bomb not only reshaped military strategy, but also deeply influenced art, literature, and global consciousness, serving as a symbol of both human ingenuity and the catastrophic potential of technological advancement. Without this ever-present specter of nuclear disaster, societies might have adopted a different outlook on the ethical boundaries of science and warfare, possibly allowing for a more optimistic view of humanity's potential. As we imagine the complex ways in which the absence of the atomic bomb might have reshaped our world, it becomes clear how pivotal this invention has been in shaping the past century. With this thought in mind, let us move forward to examine yet another turning point in history that could have dramatically altered the course of human events. Now turning to yet another intriguing historical scenario, let us consider what could have unfolded if Napoleon Bonaparte had successfully conquered Russia during his infamous campaign of 1812. Napoleon's failure in Russia is often seen as the beginning of the decline of his empire, as the harsh Russian winter and the relentless strategy of scorched earth left his once mighty army in ruins. But what if the outcome had been different? A victorious Napoleon in Russia could have solidified the French Empire's dominance over Europe, creating a continental power unmatched in its reach and influence. Had Napoleon secured control over Russia, he might have been able to stabilize his empire by establishing an alliance or puppet state in the region, ensuring a stronger foothold in Eastern Europe. This could have reshaped European borders entirely, potentially preventing the coalitions that eventually rose against him. With Russia under Napoleon's sway, major powers like Britain and Austria would likely have struggled to mount effective resistance, possibly delaying or even preventing future conflicts such as the Crimean War or the revolutions of the mid-19th century. Furthermore, a stronger and more consolidated French Empire may have prevented the fragmentation of Europe into the smaller nation-states we see today. Napoleon's vision of a unified Europe under French rule might have led to a different framework for governance across the continent, potentially integrating countries under a centralized system of laws, trade, and culture. This could have accelerated European integration by more than a century, possibly influencing the eventual formation of economic and political unions in entirely different ways. Culturally, Napoleon's conquest of Russia might have significantly altered the spread of ideas, art, and philosophy. Napoleon was not just a military leader, but also a promoter of Enlightenment ideals and legal reforms, as evidenced by the Napoleonic Code, which still influences legal systems around the world. A victorious campaign in Russia could have allowed these reforms to penetrate even deeper into Eastern Europe and Asia, spreading notions of secular governance, equality before the law, and centralized administration to regions that might otherwise have resisted such changes for decades. However, it is also worth considering that a larger and more dominant French Empire could have stifled the emergence of national identities and independence movements. Nations across Europe might have faced prolonged suppression under centralized French rule, delaying the rise of democracy and self-determination. Additionally, an extended Napoleonic regime might have intensified resistance among local populations, leading to uprisings and conflicts that would destabilize the continent in new and unpredictable ways. Economically, a successful invasion of Russia could have enabled Napoleon to break the British trade blockade known as the Continental System. With Russian resources at his disposal, Napoleon might have been able to challenge Britain's naval and commercial dominance, potentially shifting the balance of global power away from the British Empire. This could have altered the course of colonial expansion and the Industrial Revolution, with profound consequences for global trade and technological development. As we unravel the potential outcomes of a successful Russian campaign, it becomes clear how delicate the threads of history truly are. Each victory, defeat, and decision carries with it countless possibilities that shape the world we live in today. With this in mind, let us now move forward to explore yet another moment in history where the course of events could have led humanity down an entirely different path. Now turning to the next pivotal scenario, let us imagine what might have transpired if the Confederate States had triumphed in the American Civil War. A Confederate victory would have undoubtedly reshaped the trajectory of not only the United States but also the global stage. The most immediate and tragic outcome of such a scenario would have been the continuation of slavery as an institution in the southern states. The Confederacy's economy was heavily reliant on enslaved labor, and their victory would have solidified its practice, further entrenching a system that denied fundamental human rights to millions. This prolonged enslavement could have delayed the progress of civil rights movements not just in the United States but globally, as the Confederacy's survival might have legitimized and prolonged similar practices or prejudices in other parts of the world. The existence of two separate nations in North America would have drastically altered the continent's political and social fabric. The Confederate States and the Union could have become bitter rivals, locked in a perpetual struggle over borders, resources, and ideology. This division might have weakened both nations, leaving them vulnerable to external threats or unable to rise as significant global powers. Without a unified United States, the eventual emergence of the country as a dominant force in the 20th century, as a leader in both world wars and a superpower during the Cold War, might never have materialized. Instead, fragmented nations could have created a power vacuum in the Americas, potentially inviting greater European influence or colonization efforts well into the modern era. Economically, the Confederacy's reliance on a plantation-based system would have presented significant challenges in adapting to industrialization. While the Union states were rapidly industrializing during and after the war, the Confederate economy was primarily agrarian, which might have stunted its growth in a world increasingly dominated by industry and technology. This economic disparity could have exacerbated tensions between the two nations, furthering their ideological divide and limiting the overall development of the North American continent. Internationally, the Confederate States might have sought strong alliances with European powers reliant on cotton imports, such as Britain or France, to sustain their economy and legitimacy. This could have complicated international relationships, tying European nations to a regime built on slavery and possibly altering colonial histories in Africa and Asia. Such alliances might have extended or intensified conflicts between European powers as they navigated their own national interests amidst shifting economic dependencies. Culturally, a Confederate victory could have profoundly influenced the global perception of democracy and liberty. The Confederacy's existence would have stood as a contradiction to the ideals enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, presenting an alternate vision of governance rooted in inequality. This might have inspired similar separatist movements across the world, emboldening regions or groups to pursue division over unity, with potentially destabilizing consequences for nations far beyond the United States. However, it is also essential to consider the potential long-term instability within the Confederacy itself. The reliance on enslaved labor and resistance to modernization might have rendered its society increasingly fractured, possibly leading to internal conflicts and rebellions. As technology and global attitudes evolved, the Confederate States could have found themselves isolated, unable to compete in an industrialized and progressively interconnected world. This alternate history paints a vivid picture of a world divided, where the consequences of a Confederate victory could have rippled far beyond the borders of the United States. The implications touch every aspect of human society, from civil rights to global geopolitics, and remind us how the outcomes of pivotal moments in history shape the course of humanity. As we contemplate this divisive chapter, let us now step into the next scenario to uncover another moment where history might have turned in a completely different direction. With the next phase of the journey in sight, let us imagine a world where the Ming treasure fleet continued its ambitious voyages across the seas. In the early 15th century, under the command of the legendary Admiral Zheng He, China's fleets were unrivaled in size and sophistication, navigating as far as the eastern coast of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. These expeditions showcased the Ming dynasty's naval superiority and its intent to establish China as a central player in global trade networks. But what if these voyages had not ceased abruptly as they did under Emperor Yongg's successors, and had instead evolved into a sustained effort to explore, trade, and perhaps even colonize distant lands? Had the Ming treasure fleet continued its explorations, it is tantalizing to think how China's role on the global stage might have transformed. By maintaining its naval dominance, China could have established permanent trade routes and settlements across the Indian Ocean and beyond, creating an early foundation for globalization. These connections could have facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies on an unprecedented scale, centuries before the age of European exploration. Imagine an interconnected world where Chinese innovations such as gunpowder, paper, and the compass flowed directly into Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, profoundly influencing the Renaissance and the development of Western societies. Economically, China's persistent engagement in maritime trade could have solidified its position as the world's wealthiest and most influential power. By dominating critical trade routes and acting as a hub for international commerce, the Ming dynasty might have established a global economic system centered on Chinese goods and currency. This new reality might have stifled the rise of European powers such as Spain and Portugal, who relied on their own maritime explorations to access wealth and resources from the East. Instead, Europe might have played a peripheral role in global affairs, with China dictating the terms of trade and cultural exchange. Politically, an enduring naval presence would have allowed China to project power far beyond its borders, possibly extending its influence into regions like Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and Africa. Alliances, tributary states, and even territorial control could have emerged, reshaping regional dynamics and establishing China as the first true global superpower. The balance of power in the world would have shifted dramatically, potentially preempting the colonial ambitions of European empires and altering the course of modern geopolitics. Culturally, the continuation of the Ming treasure fleet's voyages could have brought about an earlier era of multiculturalism and intellectual exchange. Just as the Silk Road facilitated the blending of Eastern and Western ideas, maritime exploration could have introduced Chinese philosophy, art, and governance to distant lands, while simultaneously bringing foreign customs and innovations back to China. This cultural cross-pollination might have sparked new technological advancements and artistic achievements, enriching human civilization as a whole. Additionally, the global spread of Chinese language, cuisine, and traditions could have created a cultural landscape where Eastern influence played a far more prominent role in shaping the modern world. Yet, it is also worth pondering the challenges that might have accompanied this ambitious undertaking. Sustaining such extensive naval expeditions would have required significant resources and political will, potentially straining the Ming economy and creating internal conflicts. The prioritization of maritime exploration might have shifted focus away from domestic stability and agricultural development, leaving the empire vulnerable to internal dissent and external threats. Furthermore, interactions with other cultures, while enriching, might have also led to conflicts over trade dominance or territorial ambitions, introducing new tensions into global relations. This alternate history invites us to envision a world where the Ming dynasty fulfilled its potential as a maritime and global leader. The implications of such a scenario stretch far and wide, touching commerce, politics, culture, and even the environment. It raises questions about how history might have unfolded differently if another great power had seized the initiative to connect the world and guide its development. With this scenario in mind, let us now move forward to explore yet another moment in history where the winds of change might have blown in a completely different direction. As the next challenge unfolds, let us consider a world where the Soviet Union claimed victory in the race to land on the moon. In the heat of the Cold War, the space race became a defining arena for demonstrating technological prowess and ideological supremacy. The United States and the Soviet Union, representing diametrically opposed political systems, poured immense resources into achieving this monumental milestone. But what if the Soviets had triumphed, planting their flag on the lunar surface before the Americans? Such a moment would have sent shockwaves across the globe, fundamentally altering perceptions of technological superiority. A Soviet moon landing would have been hailed as the ultimate validation of their political and scientific systems, showcasing the supposed strength and efficiency of communism over capitalism. The psychological impact of this achievement would have been immense, potentially inspiring socialist movements worldwide while sowing doubt and anxiety among Western nations. The triumph might have sparked a deeper ideological divide, influencing nations still wavering between aligning with the United States or the Soviet Union during this tense period in history. International relations might have evolved in vastly different ways, with the Soviet Union asserting dominance in space exploration. Its influence on developing nations could have grown substantially. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America might have leaned more heavily toward socialist ideologies, reshaping the political landscape of the 20th century. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies would have faced heightened pressure to respond decisively, potentially accelerating their own advancements in science and technology at an even faster pace to regain their footing. The trajectory of space exploration itself could have taken an entirely different path. A Soviet-led space program might have prioritized collective achievements with an emphasis on showcasing the strength of the communist bloc. We may have seen earlier cooperative missions among socialist nations, or even the establishment of lunar research bases as a symbol of Soviet ingenuity. On the other hand, the intense rivalry between these superpowers might have escalated further, with the United States aggressively pursuing its own lunar ambitions to close the gap. The competition might have driven humanity to venture deeper into space sooner than we did in our timeline, perhaps advancing human exploration of Mars or other celestial bodies by decades. Moreover, the cultural impact of this scenario cannot be understated. The iconic image of the American flag on the moon has become a symbol of human achievement and ingenuity, fostering a sense of optimism and unity. But if the Soviet Union had achieved this feat, it is worth imagining how their own triumph might have been memorialized. A different narrative of progress and exploration, rooted in the values of Soviet ideology, could have shaped global attitudes toward science, exploration, and the role of government in driving these efforts. The balance of soft power during the Cold War might have tilted decisively, influencing art, literature, and media as these two ideologies vied for the hearts and minds of the global population. Yet, this alternate history also raises questions about the challenges that might have accompanied such a development. Would the heightened tensions between the two superpowers have brought the world closer to military conflict, as each sought to outdo the other? Could the immense focus on space exploration have diverted critical resources from pressing issues on Earth, such as poverty, inequality, and environmental challenges? And how might humanity's collective vision of space exploration have evolved if framed primarily through the lens of competition rather than cooperation? This thought experiment invites us to reflect on how a single event can ripple across history, reshaping politics, innovation, and culture. It challenges us to think about the profound influence that technology and ideology wield in shaping the world we inhabit. With this in mind, let us now journey further into history to uncover another pivotal moment that could have dramatically altered the course of civilization. Now turning to a world without the Protestant Reformation, let us consider how history might have unfolded if Martin Luther had never taken his fateful stand against the Catholic Church in the early 16th century. The Protestant Reformation was a seismic event that reshaped Europe's religious, political, and cultural landscape. But what if it had never occurred? Without Luther's actions, the Catholic Church might have retained unchallenged dominance across Europe for centuries longer. Religious dissent would likely have been suppressed, leaving little room for the rise of diverse Protestant movements that challenged papal authority and the established order. In this alternate timeline, the political structure of Europe could have remained far more centralized under the influence of the Church. Monarchs and rulers, without the leverage gained by aligning with Protestantism, might have been forced into a tighter alliance with the Vatican. Nations like England, which famously broke away during Henry VIII's reign, might have remained Catholic, solidifying the Church's role as a central authority in European governance. This dominance, however, might not have led to stability. The lack of religious plurality could have stifled intellectual debate and dissent, potentially slowing the emergence of new ideas that fueled societal evolution. The scientific and artistic advancements of the Renaissance and Enlightenment could have taken a very different trajectory. The Protestant Reformation indirectly set the stage for the questioning of authority and established beliefs, values that later became central to the scientific revolution. Without this period of upheaval, the Church might have exercised tighter control over intellectual pursuits, potentially delaying discoveries in fields like astronomy, biology, and physics. Figures such as Galileo or Copernicus might have faced even harsher suppression, slowing the progress of scientific thought. Similarly, art and philosophy might have remained heavily steeped in religious themes, with exploration of secular subjects or humanist ideas emerging much later, if at all. Beyond science and art, the societal changes brought about by the Reformation could have manifested differently as well. The Reformation played a key role in shaping modern concepts of individualism and personal freedom, particularly in regions where Protestant movements emphasized direct engagement with Scripture and personal faith over hierarchical mediation. Without this cultural shift, Europe might have seen a slower transition toward democratic ideals and personal liberties, as these movements often challenged both religious and political authority, laying the groundwork for later revolutions and reforms. This alternate history also raises questions about the global impact of a singular religious authority. As colonial powers spread their influence across the world, the absence of religious competition could have meant a more uniform propagation of Catholicism, altering the cultural and spiritual landscapes of the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Would this have led to greater cohesion within colonial empires, or would resistance to a monolithic religious system have sparked different forms of rebellion and reform? Finally, we must consider the potential consequences for governance. The Protestant Reformation fragmented religious authority in Europe, inadvertently redistributing power between the church, monarchs, and emerging nation-states. Without this fragmentation, the political alliances and conflicts of the subsequent centuries might have taken radically different forms. Would Europe have remained a patchwork of Catholic monarchies beholden to the Pope, or would new forces of secularism and nationalism have emerged to challenge the Church's dominance in other ways? This scenario invites us to reflect on the profound and far-reaching effects of ideological movements. Religion, while deeply personal, has played an undeniable role in shaping the structures of power, culture, and thought throughout history. As we ponder this alternate path, let us now move forward to examine another event that holds the potential to rewrite the narrative of our shared past. Moving forward, let us delve into a 20th century without the establishment of the United Nations. Created in the aftermath of World War II, the United Nations has played a critical role in facilitating international diplomacy, fostering peace, and addressing global challenges. But what if this cornerstone of modern international relations had never come into existence? In such an alternate reality, the absence of a unified platform for dialogue among nations could have significantly altered the trajectory of global conflict resolution. Without the United Nations serving as a mediator, disputes may have escalated unchecked, potentially leading to more frequent and prolonged wars. Nations lacking a trusted forum for negotiation might have sought solutions through force rather than discussion, driving up the risk of widespread military confrontations. Humanitarian efforts would likely have faced immense challenges as well. Programs that provide food aid, vaccinations, and disaster relief, largely coordinated under the umbrella of the United Nations, might have been fragmented or non-existent. The lack of an organized global response could have left countless communities vulnerable, exacerbating the effects of famines, epidemics, and natural disasters. Without the collective commitment brought about by the United Nations, the pursuit of universal human rights could have faltered. Initiatives such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which became a guiding principle for justice and equality, might never have been adopted, leaving a void in the global fight against oppression, exploitation, and inequality. Moreover, global cooperation on pressing, shared issues like climate change and environmental protection might have been significantly delayed or even overlooked. The United Nations has often been the driving force behind international agreements on sustainability, urging countries to work together to combat challenges that transcend borders. In a world without this organization, we might have seen a lack of accountability and coordination, resulting in more severe environmental degradation and resource conflicts. In addition, smaller or less powerful nations would have faced even greater struggles to have their voices heard on the global stage. The absence of a body like the United Nations that levels the playing field in international discussions might have left these nations at the mercy of more dominant powers, perpetuating inequality and imbalance in global politics. The question of whether other organizations or alliances might have emerged to fill this void is intriguing. Could smaller, regional coalitions have taken on the mantle of peacekeeping and diplomacy? Perhaps the world would have experienced a more fragmented approach to international relations, with separate blocs pursuing their interests without the overarching framework of a global organization. However, such fragmentation may have heightened tensions and reduced the effectiveness of collective action against universal threats. Ultimately, the absence of the United Nations offers a sobering reminder of the importance of structures that foster cooperation, understanding, and shared progress among nations. While imperfect, the United Nations has undoubtedly played a pivotal role in shaping a more interconnected world. As we reflect on this alternate path, we now turn our attention to another pivotal moment in human history, one that shaped not only the balance of power but the very fabric of global identity. Now turning to the ancient past, let us explore the intriguing scenario of the Spartans emerging victorious at the Battle of Thermopylae. This pivotal conflict, often hailed as a symbol of defiance and sacrifice, saw a small coalition of Greek forces led by King Leonidas of Sparta stand against the vast Persian army of King Xerxes. Despite their valiant effort, the Spartans ultimately succumbed to the overwhelming numbers of their adversaries. But what if the outcome had been different? A Spartan victory at Thermopylae could have drastically altered the trajectory of Western civilization. For starters, the balance of power within ancient Greece would likely have shifted significantly. Sparta, known for its militaristic and austere lifestyle, might have cemented its influence across the Greek city-states, overshadowing the cultural and intellectual advancements associated with Athens. Instead of a world shaped by the philosophical musings of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, or the artistic triumphs of the Parthenon, a Spartan-dominated Greece might have emphasized martial discipline, collective duty, and physical prowess above all else. Spartan values, which prioritized strength and simplicity, could have influenced the governance systems of the time. The democratic ideals that flourished in Athens may have struggled to gain traction in a world ruled by Spartan authority. Imagine a society where strict adherence to duty and order replaced the Athenian celebration of debate, creativity, and individual expression. This might have reshaped the very idea of citizenship and governance in Western history, potentially delaying or even suppressing the development of democratic systems as we know them today. Furthermore, Spartan dominance might have also influenced the cultural and artistic landscape. The Spartans were not as focused on art, drama, and literature as their Athenian counterparts, and their victory could have led to a less vibrant cultural legacy. The absence of Athenian-inspired works might have deprived future generations of the rich tapestry of ideas that fueled the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. On the other hand, a Spartan victory could have fortified the Greek position against Persian expansion, creating a more unified defense against external threats. This might have strengthened the foundations of Greek independence and allowed for the continuation of Greek traditions and ideas without the looming shadow of Persian domination. However, this unity would likely come at the cost of individuality and regional diversity, as Spartan rule would have demanded conformity to its strict codes and practices. Globally, the repercussions of a Spartan-dominated Greece could have rippled far beyond the ancient world. Roman culture, heavily inspired by Greek philosophy, art, and governance, might have taken on a more militaristic and disciplined character if Spartan ideals had become the defining feature of Greek heritage. The spread of such values could have fostered a very different cultural and ideological framework for the Western world, possibly influencing everything from education to warfare in ways that are difficult to fully imagine. While the Spartans' bravery at Thermopylae earned them an enduring legacy in human history, a victory in that moment might have rewritten the story of Western civilization entirely. As we ponder this alternate path, we must consider the delicate interplay of power, culture, and innovation that defines history. Each twist and turn shapes the world we know today. With this in mind, let us move forward to another ancient turning point, one that altered the course of exploration and global connectivity. With the next phase of the journey in sight, let us explore an alternate timeline in which Christopher Columbus never embarked on his historic voyage to the Americas. The year 1492 is often regarded as a turning point in history, marking the beginning of European exploration and colonization of the New World. But what if Columbus's expedition had never taken place? What if Europe's discovery of the Americas had been delayed by decades or even centuries? Such a scenario invites us to imagine a vastly different trajectory for both the indigenous civilizations of the Americas and the global interconnectedness that followed. Without Columbus's arrival, indigenous societies like the Aztecs, the Incas, and the many complex cultures of North America might have been afforded more time to develop independently. These civilizations, with their own sophisticated systems of governance, agriculture, and trade, could have continued to thrive, innovate, and adapt without the interruption of European colonization. For example, the Inca Empire's advanced agricultural practices or the Aztecs' intricate social hierarchies might have evolved further, creating a richer legacy of indigenous achievements for the world to admire. A delay in European colonization might also have spared these societies the devastating effects of foreign diseases, which claimed the lives of countless indigenous people upon first contact. This alone could have altered the demographic and cultural landscapes of the Americas in profound ways. Imagine a continent where indigenous populations remained robust and dominant, shaping a narrative of resistance and resilience rather than one of subjugation and loss. On a global scale, the postponement of colonization could have disrupted the emergence of the transatlantic economy. The exchange of goods, ideas, and people between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, often referred to as the Columbian Exchange, might have unfolded much later, altering the course of global trade and geopolitics. Without the influx of precious metals like silver and gold from the Americas, European economies might have developed at a slower pace, potentially delaying the rise of powerful colonial empires and even the Industrial Revolution itself. Additionally, the absence of European colonization in the 15th century could have shifted the focus of exploration and expansion elsewhere. Maritime powers such as Portugal and Spain might have concentrated their efforts on Africa, Asia, or the Indian Ocean, deepening their interactions with existing civilizations in these regions. This could have fostered a different kind of global interconnectedness, one that prioritized trade and cultural exchange over conquest and colonization. However, a delayed European presence in the Americas also raises intriguing questions about the eventual encounter between the Old World and the New. Would it have been more peaceful, driven by diplomacy rather than domination? Or would the dynamics of power, technology, and ambition have inevitably led to conflict? The timing and nature of this encounter could have reshaped how history unfolded, influencing everything from global alliances to technological progress. As we reflect on this possibility, it becomes clear that Columbus's voyage was more than just a single event. It was a catalyst that set the stage for centuries of exploration, exchange, and exploitation. A world without that moment might look vastly different, shaped by forces, choices, and opportunities we can only begin to imagine. Moving forward, let us delve into another transformative moment in history, this time exploring the revolutionary force that reshaped societies and economies across the globe. Now turning to a world where industrialization was significantly delayed or prevented altogether, we encounter a profound shift in the trajectory of human history. The Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 18th century, fundamentally transformed economies, societies, and global power structures. But what if those steam engines never roared to life and factories never dotted the landscape? Imagine a world where manual labor and traditional craftsmanship remained the primary means of production. Agriculture, untouched by mechanization, would likely have continued as the backbone of economies, with populations heavily reliant on subsistence farming. This might have slowed urbanization, leaving much of the world's population in rural settings, deeply tied to the land and its seasonal rhythms. The rapid growth of cities, which emerged as hubs of industry and innovation, might have unfolded at a much slower pace or perhaps not at all. On a larger scale, the absence of industrialization could have drastically altered global trade. Without mass production, goods would have been produced in smaller quantities, making them more expensive and less accessible. This could have stifled the emergence of global markets and delayed the spread of consumer culture. Empires, too, might have developed differently, as the industrial advantage that allowed European powers to dominate much of the world would have been absent. Conflicts fueled by industrial weaponry might have played out with less intensity, while vast colonial endeavors could have taken on a slower, more limited scope. In this alternate timeline, scientific progress might also have been hindered. the technological breakthroughs that emerged from industrial needs, such as advanced machinery, transportation systems, and medical devices, might have taken centuries longer to develop. This could have delayed advancements in communication, like the telegraph and eventually the internet, and slowed the pace of globalization. Societal structures might have also remained more rigid, with fewer opportunities for upward mobility. Industrialization, for all its flaws and injustices, created new classes of workers and entrepreneurs who reshaped social hierarchies. Without it, traditional aristocracies might have retained their grip on power, and revolutions advocating equality and workers' rights might never have gained momentum. Consider the environmental impact as well. While industrialization brought pollution and resource depletion, its absence might have preserved natural landscapes and ecosystems for longer periods. However, this does not mean a utopia. Populations still growing at pre-industrial rates might have placed other strains on the environment, such as deforestation for agriculture or the overhunting of wildlife. As we ponder this scenario, it becomes evident that the Industrial Revolution was not just an economic upheaval. It was a force that touched every aspect of life, from how people lived and worked to how nations interacted on the global stage. Without it, the world we know today might resemble a patchwork of slower-paced, localized economies, where innovation crept forward at a leisurely pace and power remained concentrated in the hands of the few. Moving ahead, let us journey into another pivotal moment in history, imagining what might have happened if the Axis powers had emerged victorious in World War II. Moving forward, let us delve into an unsettling alternate reality where the Axis powers triumphed in World War II. Such a victory would have drastically altered the global landscape, creating a world where authoritarian regimes reigned supreme. Europe, under the dominance of Germany, might have been reshaped into a collection of puppet states aligned with Nazi ideology. National identities could have been suppressed, replaced by a homogenized vision of racial hierarchy as envisioned by the Third Reich. In Asia, Japanese imperial ambitions would likely have carved out a vast empire, with significant portions of China and Southeast Asia falling under its control. The Pacific would have become a region of unchallenged Japanese influence, reshaping trade routes and regional politics entirely. Culturally, the effects might have been profound and deeply troubling. Art, literature, and education could have been weaponized to serve propaganda purposes, stifling freedom of expression and promoting ideologies rooted in oppression and exclusion. Intellectual dissent might have been harshly punished, silencing voices that dared to challenge authoritarian narratives. The scientific progress that occurred in the aftermath of the war might have taken a darker turn, with research focused on advancing military and surveillance technologies to maintain control rather than fostering innovation for the betterment of humanity. Space exploration, for instance, might have been deprioritized in favor of developing tools for domination and suppression, delaying humanity's reach beyond Earth. The implications for human rights would have been catastrophic. In this alternate timeline, the atrocities committed during the war might have become institutionalized practices rather than horrors to be condemned. The establishment of concentration camps and the systematic oppression of entire groups could have continued unchecked, creating a world where persecution and inequality were normalized. The concept of universal human rights, which gained significant momentum following the revelations of World War II atrocities, might never have taken root. International organizations aimed at promoting peace and cooperation, such as the United Nations, might have either never been formed or existed as tools for propaganda rather than genuine conflict resolution. The geopolitical balance would also have been radically different. Without a decisive Allied victory, the Cold War as we know it might never have emerged. Instead, the world could have been divided among competing Axis powers, each striving to expand their authoritarian reach. resistance movements might have continued to rise, but likely at a great human cost, as surveillance and suppression measures would have been far-reaching and relentless. It is difficult to overstate how dramatically this scenario would have reshaped the cultural, political, and technological fabric of the world. A victory for the Axis powers could have set humanity on a path marked by division, suppression, and stagnation, where freedom and innovation were luxuries only for the few. As we step away from this dark vision of an alternate history, let us turn our focus to the next scenario and explore what might have emerged if the internet had been invented as early as the 19th century. Now turning to a world where the internet emerged during the 19th century, imagine how the fabric of society and the pace of progress could have transformed. This was an era defined by the Industrial Revolution, a time of groundbreaking technological advancements and social upheaval. Had the internet been introduced in this setting, it might have served as a catalyst for an unprecedented acceleration of innovation. Factories and industries, which were already revolutionizing production methods, could have implemented interconnected systems to streamline processes, reduce inefficiencies, and enhance productivity. A networked world, even in its infancy, could have enabled real-time communication between manufacturing hubs and suppliers, laying the groundwork for globalized trade and commerce decades earlier than it actually occurred. The exchange of ideas would also have been profoundly altered. During the 19th century, knowledge and information were often limited by geographical boundaries and the slow pace of traditional communication methods, such as letters and newspapers. With an early internet in place, the barriers to information dissemination could have been shattered. Scientists, inventors, and engineers from different corners of the globe might have collaborated with ease, sharing breakthroughs and discoveries at a pace unimaginable for their time. This interconnectedness could have hastened advancements in fields such as medicine, transportation, and energy. For instance, medical knowledge about germ theory or early vaccination methods might have spread more rapidly, saving countless lives and improving public health on a global scale much earlier than it actually did. Culturally, the internet could have revolutionized the way people perceived the world and each other. A platform for exchanging diverse ideas and perspectives might have fostered greater understanding and empathy among different societies, challenging the deeply entrenched notions of nationalism and colonialism that defined the era. However, there would also likely have been challenges, just as the modern internet has been a tool for misinformation and propaganda. A 19th century version could have been used to reinforce existing power structures, allowing empires and industrialists to exert even greater influence over their territories and workforces through the control of information. Education would have undergone a dramatic transformation as well. With access to an online repository of knowledge, individuals from all walks of life might have gained new opportunities for learning, challenging the rigid class systems that restricted social mobility during that period. Literacy rates could have soared as people recognized the value of participating in a connected world, reshaping societal structures and empowering individuals to pursue ambitions that were previously out of reach. The ripple effects of an early internet would have extended to every corner of society, from the arts to governance. Artistic expression might have flourished in new ways, with creators sharing their works across borders and drawing inspiration from global audiences. Similarly, governments might have used the internet to manage resources more effectively, monitor developments in their regions, and communicate policies to their citizens. However, this newfound connectivity could have also introduced risks such as surveillance and the erosion of privacy, challenges we still grapple with in today's digital age. Ultimately, a 19th century internet could have rewritten the trajectory of human history, pushing the boundaries of innovation while simultaneously posing complex social and ethical dilemmas. As we reflect on this alternate timeline, let us now shift our gaze to ancient Rome and explore what could have unfolded if Julius Caesar had evaded assassination and continued his rule. Now turning to ancient Rome, let us ponder a world where Julius Caesar had evaded the infamous conspiracy and continued his rule. Caesar's assassination marked a pivotal moment in Roman history, plunging the Republic into years of civil war and paving the way for the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus. But what if the dagger strikes of the Senate had never found their mark? What if Caesar had lived to see his vision through? The Roman Republic was already teetering under the weight of internal strife, rising populism, and a concentration of power in the hands of a few. Caesar's reforms were aimed at addressing such fractures, including measures to redistribute land, expand citizenship, and reduce the influence of a Senate that had long catered to the aristocracy. His continued leadership might have steered Rome through this turbulence with a more deliberate and gradual transition to a stable form of governance, perhaps even delaying or altering the eventual transformation into an empire. Under Caesar's rule, the expansion of Roman territories could have progressed with less upheaval, securing resources and wealth for the Republic without the destabilizing conflicts that followed his death. His military genius and diplomatic strategies were unparalleled, and with him at the helm, Rome might have avoided the costly infighting that drained its resources and diminished its influence during the ensuing years of chaos. The provinces, which often felt neglected or exploited by Rome's ruling elite, might have experienced a more inclusive administration with greater representation and fairer distribution of wealth under Caesar's reforms. Culturally, a prolonged Caesar-led Rome could have fostered an earlier flourishing of ideas and innovation. The arts, philosophy, and engineering might have found greater patronage in a Rome where stability and vision prevailed. Caesar himself was known for encouraging intellectual growth and public works, and his continued influence could have accelerated advancements that defined later Roman achievements, potentially making the Republic a beacon of progress and enlightenment earlier in history. However, challenges would have remained. Caesar was a polarizing figure, and his accumulation of power drew fierce opposition from those who feared the loss of the Republic's democratic ideals. Would his continued rule have exacerbated such divisions, or could his leadership have reconciled the competing factions of Rome? Furthermore, could Caesar have developed a system that balanced his authority with a sustainable political structure, ensuring stability beyond his lifetime? These questions remind us of the delicate balance between leadership and legacy in shaping historical trajectories. Perhaps most significantly, a Caesar who survived might have influenced the broader course of world history. A stronger, more unified Rome could have endured longer, reshaping the development of Europe, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Christianity, which emerged and spread within the framework of the Roman Empire, might have developed differently under a Rome shaped by Caesar's vision. The geopolitical landscape we know today could have been drastically altered, with effects rippling through centuries of global development. As we reflect on this tantalizing alternate timeline, the enduring power of human ambition and its role in history is clear. Now, let us journey from Rome to the chilling uncertainties of the Cold War and consider how the world might have changed if tensions during that volatile era had erupted into open conflict. With the next phase of the journey in sight, we step into the tense and shadowy corridors of the Cold War, a time when the world teetered on the brink of unimaginable catastrophe. What if the Cold War, with its ever-present threat of nuclear annihilation, had escalated into a full-blown conflict? The mere thought sends shivers down the spine, as it conjures a world where nations armed with devastating atomic weapons unleashed their fury upon one another. The aftermath would have been nothing short of apocalyptic. Massive urban centers reduced to ashes, unthinkable loss of life, and the collapse of global infrastructure would have plunged humanity into an era of darkness and despair. The survivors, if any, would have faced the daunting task of rebuilding civilizations in a radioactive wasteland, where basic necessities like food, water, and shelter would have been scarce. Politically, the global landscape would have been irrevocably altered. The collapse of superpowers like the United States and the Soviet Union, which would have been primary targets in such a conflict, could have left a power vacuum, giving rise to fragmented regional powers vying for dominance. The delicate balance of alliances that shaped much of the 20th century might have dissolved, leading to a chaotic struggle for survival and control in a shattered world. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism, which defined the Cold War, could have been rendered moot in a world where survival overshadowed all other concerns. Technologically, the nuclear conflict might have stifled innovation and progress for decades or even centuries. The resources and knowledge needed to advance medicine, science, and engineering might have been lost in the destruction or deprioritized amidst the struggle to rebuild. On the other hand, one could also speculate that the sheer scale of devastation might have forced humanity to come together, setting aside differences to ensure mutual survival. Could such a monumental tragedy have united humanity in a way that no diplomacy ever could, giving rise to a new era of cooperation and shared purpose? Or would distrust and competition have persisted, further dividing an already fractured world? Culturally, the scars of a nuclear war would have been deep and long-lasting. Generations would have grown up under the shadow of loss, grappling with the trauma of such an event. Art, literature, and philosophy might have reflected a collective sense of grief and a yearning for redemption. Religious and spiritual beliefs could have transformed dramatically as people sought meaning in the face of immense suffering. Additionally, the environment would have been drastically altered, with vast stretches of land rendered uninhabitable, ecosystems destroyed, and climate patterns disrupted by the long-lasting effects of nuclear fallout. As we contemplate this harrowing scenario, it becomes evident that the Cold War's delicate balance of deterrence, though fraught with fear and uncertainty, may have been the thin thread that spared humanity from such a fate. The near misses and moments of crisis that defined the era, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, remind us of how close the world came to the brink. Reflecting on this chilling alternate timeline highlights the fragility of human civilization and the profound responsibility entrusted to leaders during moments of extreme tension. With the Cold War's haunting specter behind us, let us now turn to an event that changed the course of history on calmer seas, and imagine a world where the Titanic's fateful voyage ended not in tragedy but triumph. With the next phase of the journey in sight, we find ourselves aboard the Titanic, not as it rests on the ocean floor, but as it triumphantly completes its maiden voyage. Imagine a world where the Titanic, that symbol of human ambition and technological progress, never met its tragic fate. Its safe arrival in New York could have marked a turning point in maritime history, reshaping how the world viewed ocean liners and their potential. Public confidence in large-scale sea travel, already high during the Titanic's time, would have soared to unprecedented levels. The Titanic would have been celebrated not just as an engineering marvel, but as a testament to the reliability of human innovation. This scenario could have had profound implications for maritime safety standards. Without the Titanic disaster to act as a wake-up call, safety protocols, like the mandatory inclusion of lifeboats for all passengers and crew, might have been delayed or overlooked for years. The complacency of the time may have persisted, leaving future passengers vulnerable to disasters that could have been avoided with stricter regulations. Alternatively, the Titanic's success could have spurred an era of even grander ships, where luxury and technological advancements took center stage, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible at sea. Economically, the shipping industry might have evolved differently. The Titanic was intended to be the crown jewel of transatlantic travel, and its continued success could have placed even greater pressure on competing shipping companies to innovate, creating a golden age of ocean liners. The focus on luxury, speed, and capacity might have revolutionized global trade and travel much earlier, cementing ocean liners as the preferred mode of transportation for both people and goods. Culturally, the survival of the Titanic might have carried a vastly different significance in the collective consciousness. Instead of being remembered as a tragic cautionary tale, it could have become an enduring symbol of human achievement and resilience. The stories of those on board would still have been told, but they might have celebrated tales of triumph rather than loss. The Titanic could have inspired films, literature, and art that focused on its grandeur and success, rather than the heartbreak and heroism born from its sinking. Yet, one also wonders whether the lessons learned from the Titanic disaster would have been learned at all. The tragedy led to critical reforms that improved maritime safety, saving countless lives in the decades that followed. Without that event, might humanity have been slower to recognize the importance of preparedness and caution in the face of nature's unpredictability? The Titanic's survival could have been a double-edged sword celebrating human ingenuity while possibly delaying the progress born of hard-earned lessons. As we leave this alternate reality where the Titanic safely reaches its destination, we set our sights on an even more ancient question. What if the legendary Alexander the Great had lived longer and his vast ambitions had continued to shape the ancient world? As the sun rises on the next chapter, we delve into a world where Alexander the Great, the legendary conqueror who built one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen, defied the limits of his tragically short life. What if Alexander, instead of dying at the age of 32, had lived to see his ambitious vision through? With his military genius and insatiable drive for expansion, Alexander might have continued to push the boundaries of his empire, forging an even more unified and enduring Hellenistic world. His plans to expand further into Arabia, deepen his foothold in India, and possibly set his sights on Rome could have reshaped the trajectory of global history. A longer reign could have provided Alexander the opportunity to consolidate his empire, which was vast but fragile. His untimely death left his generals, known as the Diadochi, battling for control, ultimately fracturing the empire into smaller kingdoms. Had Alexander lived to institutionalize his authority, establish stable governance, and groom a clear successor, the Hellenistic world might have remained united under his influence for generations. The fusion of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian cultures that Alexander encouraged might have deepened and expanded, creating a rich and enduring cultural tapestry that would influence global civilizations in profound ways. Economically, a unified empire under Alexander's continued leadership might have accelerated trade and technological advancements. His establishment of cities like Alexandria as hubs of knowledge and commerce could have spread even further, fostering economic integration across continents. The Silk Road, which later played a pivotal role in connecting the East and West, might have been developed earlier, bringing innovations, philosophies, and goods to a global stage centuries ahead of schedule. Culturally, the extended life of Alexander could have meant the flourishing of a more interconnected world, where Hellenistic ideals of art, architecture, and philosophy spread even further, shaping societies from Europe to the Far East. His focus on blending cultures might have fostered greater understanding and collaboration among diverse peoples, leaving a legacy of unity rather than division. Imagine how accelerated cultural exchange might have influenced advancements in science, governance, and education across the known world. However, Alexander's relentless pursuit of conquest was not without its challenges. Would his ambition have eventually outpaced his ability to maintain control? Could internal dissent and rebellion have undermined his empire, or might a unified world under Alexander have sparked resistance from emerging powers like Rome? His extraordinary legacy, while inspiring, also raises questions about the sustainability of such a vast and diverse empire under one man's vision. As we leave this intriguing alternate history of an enduring Hellenistic empire, we now turn our attention to another pivotal moment. What if the Berlin Wall had never fallen, and the division of Germany remained an enduring reality in the heart of Europe? As the next phase of the journey comes into focus, we ask, what if the Berlin Wall, that iconic symbol of division, had never fallen? Imagine a world where East and West Germany remained separated, reflecting a persistent ideological divide between communism and capitalism. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 marked a turning point not only for Germany but for the world, signaling the nearing end of the Cold War. But if the wall had endured, the geopolitical landscape of Europe could have taken on a vastly different shape. The Cold War tensions between the Eastern Bloc and the West might have deepened, with Germany remaining a stark reminder of the irreconcilable differences between the two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Without the unification of Germany, Europe could have become an even more unstable chessboard for proxy conflicts, espionage, and political maneuvering. The European Union, which has long relied on Germany as an economic and political leader, might never have developed into the cohesive force it is today. A divided Germany could have hindered economic collaboration across Europe, delaying or even preventing the integration of Eastern European nations into a broader European framework. Culturally, the division might have further entrenched differences in values, ideologies, and societal structures between the East and the West. The free exchange of ideas, art, and innovation that blossomed after German reunification might have been stifled, leaving Eastern Germany isolated, with its population continuing to face limited freedoms, restricted access to information, and economic stagnation. The contrast between the prosperity of West Germany and the struggles of East Germany could have grown even more pronounced, fostering resentment and deepening the divide across generations. Economically, the consequences of a divided Germany would likely have rippled across the globe. Without the unified German economy driving European recovery and growth, the global economy could have faced prolonged instability. West Germany's economic strength has been a cornerstone of Europe's financial success, and without it, the region might have been less equipped to weather challenges like recessions or fiscal crises. Meanwhile, East Germany, under continued communist rule, might have remained heavily dependent on the dwindling resources of the Soviet Union, leading to further economic hardship. On a global scale, a divided Germany could have perpetuated the arms race and heightened the risk of military conflict. The enduring presence of the Berlin Wall might have emboldened hardline leaders on both sides, increasing the likelihood of confrontations that could escalate into open warfare. The symbolic power of the wall would also have rallied support for more aggressive policies, potentially delaying or even halting the eventual thawing of relations between East and West. Yet some intriguing questions emerge. Would the prolonged division of Germany have kept the Soviet Union on firmer footing, delaying its eventual collapse in the early 1990s? Could the stability provided by an enduring Eastern Bloc have shifted the balance of global power, creating a multipolar world rather than the United States-dominated order we see today? Or might the continued existence of the Berlin Wall have galvanized greater resistance movements on both sides, leading to unforeseen consequences for global politics? As we explore these possibilities, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of yet another earth-shifting moment in history. What if the printing press, the revolutionary invention that reshaped the way knowledge was spread, had never been created? As the sun rises on the next chapter, we consider a world that never experienced the profound impact of the printing press. When Johannes Gutenberg introduced his groundbreaking invention in the 1500s, it revolutionized the way knowledge was shared and preserved. But what if the printing press had never been created? Imagine a society where the spread of information relied solely on handwritten manuscripts, a painstakingly slow process that could take months or even years to produce a single book. The delayed dissemination of knowledge would have fundamentally altered the course of history, stifling the intellectual and cultural movements that shaped the modern world. The Renaissance, a period characterized by the rebirth of art, science, and humanism, might have been drastically delayed or even diminished. Without the ability to mass-produce texts, the ideas of figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo might have remained confined to select circles, limiting their influence. The spread of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge rediscovered during this era would have been severely hampered, depriving Europe of a crucial intellectual spark. As a result, the cultural flourishing that defined the Renaissance might have unfolded centuries later, altering the trajectory of Western civilization. The impact on the Reformation would likely have been even more profound. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, a catalyst for religious reform, spread rapidly across Europe thanks to the printing press. Without this technology, the Reformation's momentum might have faltered, leaving the Catholic Church's authority unchallenged for much longer. A world without the Reformation might have seen slower progress toward religious freedom and the separation of church and state. The ripple effects could have extended far and wide, influencing governance, individual liberties, and even the development of modern democracy. Scientific advancements, too, would have been significantly delayed. The printing press played a pivotal role in enabling the rapid exchange of ideas among scientists. Works like Copernicus' heliocentric theory and Galileo's astronomical findings reached a wide audience, challenging established beliefs and paving the way for the scientific revolution. Without the printing press, the collaboration and competition that fueled scientific progress might have been stifled, leaving humanity with a far more limited understanding of the natural world. Technologies and discoveries we now take for granted, such as electricity or antibiotics, might have arrived centuries later. Education, a cornerstone of societal progress, would have been another major casualty. The printing press made books affordable and accessible, transforming education from a privilege of the elite to a possibility for the masses. Without it, literacy rates across the world might have remained abysmally low, with knowledge concentrated in the hands of the wealthy and powerful. This could have perpetuated rigid social hierarchies, limiting upward mobility and stifling innovation. The widespread availability of textbooks, which today forms the bedrock of formal education systems, might have been an unattainable dream. Society itself would likely have evolved along a slower and more fragmented path. Without the unifying power of shared knowledge and ideas, cultures might have remained more insular with limited global exchange. Progress in areas like governance, human rights, and technology would have been uneven and delayed, creating a world that lagged far behind the one we know today. The lack of timely information could have also made societies more vulnerable to manipulation, as rumors and misinformation would have spread unchecked, influencing decisions in ways we can scarcely imagine. Yet, even in this alternate scenario, one has to wonder, would humanity's inherent curiosity and drive for innovation eventually have led to a similar breakthrough? Could another form of mass communication have emerged, altering the timeline but preserving the ultimate trajectory of human progress? Or would the absence of the printing press have created a starkly different world, defined by slower development and greater inequality? As these questions linger, we turn to another momentous possibility. What if the events of September 11th had been prevented? How might the world's geopolitical and cultural dynamics have shifted without the rippling effects of that tragic day? Moving forward, we step into a world where the catastrophic events of September 11th never came to pass. Imagine if the measures, intelligence, and strategies needed to thwart the attacks had been in place, forever altering the trajectory of history. The immediate aftermath that reshaped the early 21st century might have unfolded very differently. Without the attacks, the global war on terror may never have been launched, sparing countless lives and resources dedicated to prolonged conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, and beyond. The absence of these wars could have allowed nations to focus their energies on more cooperative international efforts, potentially leading to advancements in global unity and addressing pressing global issues such as climate change and poverty. Geopolitically, the relationships between nations might have evolved with less tension and suspicion. Countries across the world drastically ramped up their security measures in response to September 11th, but without the attacks, this wave of heightened surveillance and restricted freedoms might not have emerged as the norm. Civil liberties, which were curbed in the name of national security through laws like the Patriot Act, might have remained more intact, preserving individual privacy and freedom on a much larger scale. The balance between security and freedom is something society continuously negotiates, but the absence of this event could have delayed or shifted that conversation entirely. The cultural and societal impact would also have been profound. September 11th triggered a surge in national unity in the United States, but it also fueled divisions, prejudices, and misunderstandings on a global scale. Without those tragic events, perhaps the rise of Islamophobia and the stereotyping of entire communities could have been mitigated, paving the way for more inclusive and harmonious intercultural relations. The prevention of the attacks might also have altered the global narrative of fear and division that characterized much of the early 21st century. Instead, a less fractured world may have emerged with fewer barriers to collaboration, mutual understanding, and human progress. Economically, the ripple effects would have been significant as well. The attacks caused immense financial disruptions from the stock market to industries like travel and insurance. Without this shock, markets may have remained steadier, allowing businesses and economies to grow without the interruptions and uncertainties that followed September 11th. Investments in homeland security, which soared in the years after the attacks, might have been redirected elsewhere, potentially fostering innovation, education, or healthcare instead. Yet, even in this scenario, questions arise. Would the absence of the tragic events have simply delayed other targeted attacks, as determined adversaries sought new ways to exploit vulnerabilities? Would the world have missed out on the lessons learned from the tragedy, such as enhanced intelligence sharing and international cooperation in combating terrorism? Or would humanity have charted a less turbulent course, avoiding the prolonged scars of war and division? With these thoughts in mind, we now shift our attention to another fascinating possibility. What if the Great Depression, one of the most devastating economic crises in modern history, had never gripped the globe? How would the economic and political landscape of the 20th century have changed in its absence? Now turning to one of the most pivotal economic and political events in modern history, let us consider a world where the Great Depression never happened. Imagine a scenario where the economic prosperity of the Roaring Twenties continued uninterrupted, sparing millions from the hardship of unemployment, poverty, and hunger. Without the Great Depression, the cascading economic failures that gripped nations might have been avoided, allowing for steady growth instead of the widespread collapse that shook global markets. The political repercussions could have been equally transformative. The dire economic conditions of the Great Depression created fertile ground for the rise of extremist ideologies and totalitarian regimes, including the ascent of Adolf Hitler in Germany. Without the desperation and instability caused by mass unemployment and social disillusionment, the political landscape of Europe may have looked vastly different. The absence of these conditions might have diminished the appeal of authoritarian figures promising economic revival, potentially averting the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust. Furthermore, social safety nets and modern economic policies might have taken a different trajectory. The Great Depression spurred governments to adopt revolutionary measures, from the New Deal in the United States to reforms in Europe that laid the foundation for welfare states. In a world without this crisis, such policies might have developed more gradually or under different circumstances, potentially altering the timeline and nature of social progress. On the other hand, one could argue that the absence of the Great Depression might have delayed necessary reforms, leaving vulnerable populations without the support systems we take for granted today. The economic thought that emerged from the trials of the Depression, including the rise of Keynesian economics, might have evolved differently, shaping how governments approach financial crises and economic stability. Internationally, the absence of the Great Depression might have fostered stronger economic cooperation and trade relationships. Protectionist policies like those seen during the Depression, such as the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariff, might never have been enacted, allowing global trade to flourish more freely. This could have strengthened ties between nations, potentially reducing the tensions that contributed to international conflict during the 20th century. However, some questions remain. Would unchecked economic growth have widened inequalities, concentrating wealth further among a privileged few? Or would a prolonged era of prosperity have created more opportunities for innovation, education, and social mobility, leading to a more equitable global landscape? These are questions that challenge us to consider the delicate interplay between adversity, reform, and progress in shaping history. As we reflect on this possibility, it is clear that history's challenges often serve as catalysts for change, spurring us to innovate and adapt. And with this thought, we conclude our exploration of alternate paths and pivotal turning points in world history. These what-if scenarios remind us of the profound power that single events can hold in shaping our world. Which of these alternate realities sparks your curiosity the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again as we continue our journey through the mysteries of history. Now turning to the enduring mystery of ancient knowledge, let us delve deeper into the idea of a world where the Library of Alexandria survived. This legendary hub of learning, said to house hundreds of thousands of scrolls from across the ancient world, could have been a catalyst for unparalleled scientific, technological, and cultural advancements. Imagine if texts on advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering from ancient civilizations had been preserved and shared, potentially bridging the gap between antiquity and the modern era. For instance, consider the Antikythera mechanism, an advanced ancient Greek device used to predict celestial events. What if similar technological blueprints had been stored in the library and survived to influence early scientific thought? The preservation of medical texts from Egypt, India, and Greece could have revolutionized healthcare centuries earlier. Techniques like cataract surgery, which existed in ancient India, or advanced anatomical knowledge from works like those of Herophilos, an early Greek anatomist, might have been disseminated widely, accelerating medical science and improving global life expectancy. Philosophical treatises from Aristotle to Confucian works could have bridged cultural divides, fostering cross-cultural understanding and collaboration. Furthermore, consider the impact on navigation and exploration. Texts detailing precise star charts, navigational methods, or even theories of a round Earth could have advanced global exploration by centuries, reshaping how societies connected and traded with one another. In terms of culture, preserved literary works from Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond might have provided inspiration for countless generations, enriching art, storytelling, and cultural expression. The continuity of shared knowledge could have prevented the intellectual decline of the so-called Dark Ages, leading to a continuous progression of ideas from antiquity to the present day. The Renaissance, often credited as a rebirth of classical knowledge, might have occurred much earlier, sparking an earlier era of global progress, yet this raises questions. Would humanity have become overly reliant on ancient ideas, potentially stifling innovation? Or would the vast reservoir of knowledge have sparked even greater creativity and experimentation? The loss of the Library of Alexandria remains one of history's greatest tragedies, but imagining its survival challenges us to consider the transformative power of knowledge and the importance of its preservation. As we explore these possibilities, the survival of this ancient treasure serves as a potent reminder of how fragile progress can be and how much it depends on our commitment to safeguarding and sharing what we learn. Moving forward, let us delve into the intriguing possibility of a world where the Roman Empire never fell. focusing on the profound cultural and religious implications this might have had. The Roman Empire was not only a political and military powerhouse but also a cultural juggernaut, deeply influencing the development of art, law, language, and religion across its vast territories. Had it endured, the religious landscape of the world could have taken a dramatically different course. Christianity, which rose to prominence during Rome's later years, might have developed in a more centralized and unified form under the continued influence of a stable Roman state. Without the fragmentation caused by the empire's collapse, the early Christian church might have remained less divided, potentially avoiding the schisms and theological disputes that arose in later centuries. On the other hand, the persistence of Roman hegemony might have altered the spread and evolution of other religions, such as Islam. The rapid expansion of Islam in the 7th century was facilitated in part by the fragmented states that emerged from Rome's fall. A united and strong Roman presence in the Mediterranean region could have presented a formidable obstacle to this expansion, possibly delaying or reshaping the course of Islamic history. Alternatively, prolonged interactions and exchanges between a unified Roman Empire and the early Islamic world could have fostered a unique synthesis of ideas, leading to cultural and intellectual developments vastly different from what we see today. Beyond religion, the preservation of Roman infrastructure and governance might have further unified the diverse cultures within its borders, creating a more interconnected and cosmopolitan society. The Latin language, rather than evolving into distinct Romance languages, might have remained a global lingua franca, cementing a shared cultural identity across Europe and parts of the Middle East. This shared identity could have influenced everything from international relations to the arts, creating a continuity of tradition and innovation that shaped the world in unheard-of ways. However, we must also consider how the prolonged dominance of a single empire might have suppressed regional diversity and innovation. Would the Roman Empire's dominance have stifled the emergence of new ideas and movements, or would its stability have provided a fertile ground for intellectual and cultural growth? Such questions highlight the delicate balance between unity and diversity in the evolution of human civilization. The idea of a Roman Empire that never fell serves as a thought-provoking lens through which to examine the interconnectedness of culture, religion, and progress, inviting us to reflect on how history's turning points shape the world we live in today. Now turning to the fascinating scenario of the American Revolution failing, imagine the ripple effects this could have had on the global spread of democracy. The successful American Revolution was a beacon of inspiration for countless independence movements and democratic uprisings around the world. Without this pivotal event, the idea of a government by the people and for the people might have taken a backseat, delaying the rise of democracy as a dominant political system. Under continued British rule, the United States would likely have remained a colony, its vast resources fueling the expansion and consolidation of the British Empire. This prolonged imperial dominance could have reinforced the perception of monarchy and colonialism as the status quo, dissuading other nations from seeking self-governance and delaying the wave of decolonization that reshaped the 20th century. Revolutionary movements in places like France or Latin America might have faltered without the precedent set by the American patriots, potentially altering the trajectory of modern history. Under a prolonged British imperial rule, colonialism might have endured well beyond the 20th century. The British Empire's already formidable global reach could have expanded further, with territories in North America serving as a stronger economic and military base. This could have meant the perpetuation of exploitative systems, delaying the empowerment and independence of colonized nations across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. The absence of a powerful and independent United States might also have meant a weaker challenge to European colonial powers, creating a world where imperial networks lasted for centuries longer. Moreover, the British Empire might have continued to export its own brand of governance, culture, and economic systems across the globe. shaping societies in ways vastly different from the dynamic, multipolar world we know today. But could this centralized dominance have also led to unintended consequences, such as intensified resistance movements or the evolution of alternative political ideologies? The lack of an independent United States might have created a vacuum for other forms of governance to emerge as dominant powers sought to fill the ideological and political void. For instance, socialism or authoritarianism might have gained more traction in response to the persistence of colonial monarchies, further complicating the global balance of power. Additionally, without the United States as an early pioneer in innovation and industry, the pace of technological and economic progress might have taken a very different path. Would the Industrial Revolution have unfolded differently without the American market and resources? Or would global trade have taken alternative routes under an omnipresent British influence? Reflecting on this scenario leads us to consider how history is so often shaped by fragile tipping points. The failure of the American Revolution would have set the stage for a world dominated by empires and monarchies instead of democracies and free nations. This raises profound questions about how one moment in history can empower the collective aspirations of people worldwide, underscoring the significance of this revolutionary success in shaping the world we live in today. Moving forward, let us unravel the implications of yet another transformative moment in history, where the South emerged victorious in the American Civil War. With the next phase of the journey in sight, imagine a world where the South had emerged victorious in the American Civil War. Such a scenario would not only have reshaped the United States, but could have had profound implications on global perceptions of human rights. The Confederate States of America, built on the foundation of slavery, might have persisted as an independent nation, institutionalizing and expanding the practice of human enslavement. This could have set a dangerous precedent, emboldening other nations to either continue or reinstate systems of forced labor, delaying the global abolitionist movements that gained momentum in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Without the moral and political pressure from a united, anti-slavery United States, international condemnations of slavery could have fragmented or even weakened over time. The ripple effects of this would have touched every corner of the world. For instance, the persistence of slavery in a victorious Confederacy might have influenced economic policies globally. Nations reliant on cash crops such as cotton or tobacco might have forged alliances with the South, turning a blind eye to the human cost in favor of economic gains. This could have perpetuated exploitative labor systems in regions like Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia, where colonial powers were still imposing their dominance. The normalization of slavery as a legitimate economic system might have stalled movements advocating for workers' rights and equitable labor practices, creating a world where human beings were commodified for far longer than they were in our actual timeline. The global fight against systemic inequality could have faced insurmountable delays, leaving societies deeply entrenched in oppressive hierarchies. Additionally, such a world might have seen significant delays in the progress of civil rights movements. Figures like Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman, whose legacies were tied to the Union's victory and the abolition of slavery, might have been marginalized in a Confederate-dominated narrative. Their voices, along with countless others, might have been silenced or diminished, preventing the powerful waves of social change driven by their advocacy. Education systems, media, and cultural institutions in both the Confederacy and Allied nations could have upheld ideologies of racial superiority, further entrenching discriminatory practices worldwide. This systemic racism might have influenced immigration policies, citizenship laws, and even the political framework of future democracies, creating a world divided along even deeper racial lines. But would this perpetuation of inequality have inevitably sparked larger and more violent resistance movements? The resilience of human beings in the face of injustice cannot be understated. It is possible that prolonged oppression might have led to earlier and perhaps bloodier uprisings, as marginalized groups sought liberation through force rather than policy. In such a world, social contracts might have fractured, altering the evolution of governance and human rights on a global scale. Moreover, the absence of a strong, United States to champion principles of equality and freedom might have shifted the role of other powers, such as Britain or France, in defining the global narrative on human rights. Would these nations have risen to fill the moral vacuum, or would they have resigned to complacency, allowing systemic oppression to expand unchecked? Reflecting on this scenario forces us to confront the fragility of human progress. The victory of the South in the American Civil War could have prolonged not only slavery, but also the cultural and legal doctrines that justified it. This would have left an indelible mark on the values and ethics of nations around the world, shaping a much bleaker trajectory for the fight for human rights. Yet, as history has shown, even in the darkest of times, the pursuit of freedom and equality can ignite seemingly impossible revolutions. With this stark possibility in mind, let us now turn our attention to another extraordinary moment in history: the voyages of the Ming treasure fleet and their potential to transform the global balance of power. With the next phase of the journey in sight, imagine a world where the Axis powers emerged victorious in World War II. The balance of global power would have been dramatically altered, reshaping the political, cultural, and ideological landscapes of continents far and wide. Under the dominance of fascist regimes, societies might have been restructured to align with the oppressive ideologies championed by Axis leaders. Concepts of freedom, democracy, and individual rights could have been supplanted by doctrines of control, conformity, and racial hierarchy, creating a chilling global order. The arts, for instance, would likely have been co-opted as tools for propaganda. Rather than serving as a medium for self-expression and rebellion, they might have been restricted to glorifying the state, its leaders, and its ideals. Writers, filmmakers, and artists might have been silenced, their works censored or destroyed, replaced by state-approved creations designed to perpetuate nationalist and supremacist ideologies. The cultural diversity that fosters innovation and creativity could have been stifled, erasing the vibrant artistic movements that emerged in the wake of the war's actual outcome. Society as a whole might have been stratified under severe hierarchies based on racial and political ideologies. Educational institutions could have been transformed into mechanisms for indoctrination, teaching generations to perpetuate the beliefs and practices of a fascist regime. Civil liberties might have been non-existent, with surveillance and state control infiltrating every aspect of life. The spirit of resistance, which emerged as a powerful force during the real-world conflicts, might have been crushed under the weight of fear and oppression. This oppression could have delayed social progress for decades, if not centuries, erasing the milestones achieved in the second half of the 20th century. Technological innovation, on the other hand, presents a more complex possibility. On one hand, the centralized control of resources and research might have accelerated certain advancements, particularly in areas deemed strategic by the regimes, such as weaponry, surveillance technology, and infrastructure. However, without the global collaboration and competitive spirit that characterized the post-war era, progress in fields like medicine, communication, and space exploration might have been significantly hindered. The moral questions and ethical considerations that shape the direction of technological development could have been disregarded entirely, leading to scientific applications driven solely by the interests of the state, without regard for humanity's broader well-being. The global economy would have likely been reshaped as well, with trade routes, markets, and industries reorganized to serve the Axis powers' vision of dominance. Countries and regions that were subjugated might have been exploited for their resources and labor, further entrenching inequality and dismantling emerging economies. The Axis victory could have created a world of stark economic disparities, with wealth and power concentrated in the hands of a few, while much of the world remained oppressed and impoverished. Reflecting on this grim scenario, it is undeniable that a victory by the Axis powers in World War II would have left an indelible mark on every aspect of human civilization. However, as history has repeatedly demonstrated, the human spirit's capacity to resist oppression and aspire for freedom is a force that cannot be underestimated. With this sobering exploration behind us, let us now turn our attention to another pivotal moment in history: the possibility of the Ming treasure fleet continuing its voyages and how this might have altered the course of globalization. As the sun rises on the next chapter of this journey, let us contemplate the remarkable potential locked within the voyages of the Ming treasure fleet. In the early 15th century, these grand fleets sailed under the command of Admiral Zheng He, showcasing the might and innovation of the Ming dynasty. These expeditions reached far-off lands, fostering trade, cultural exchange, and diplomacy on an unprecedented scale. But history took a different turn when the fleets were recalled and China entered an era of isolationism. Now imagine if that fateful decision had never been made. Had the Ming treasure fleet continued its explorations, the world might have experienced an earlier and perhaps entirely different phase of globalization. China could have solidified itself as the dominant maritime and economic power of the 15th century, establishing trade networks that spanned continents. The exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies may have accelerated, possibly bringing transformative inventions like gunpowder, printing, and advanced navigation techniques to Europe and beyond far earlier than they actually arrived. This could have reshaped the trajectory of world history, with the Ming dynasty at the helm of a new interconnected world. Furthermore, the continuation of these voyages might have altered the balance of cultural influence. Chinese philosophy, art, and governance practices could have spread more widely, profoundly shaping societies across Asia, Africa, and perhaps even Europe. Instead of the age of exploration being led by European powers in the 16th century, we might have seen a world where Chinese explorers and merchants played a central role in shaping the global order. This cultural exchange might have fostered a more integrated and cooperative global community, with less emphasis on conquest and more on mutual enrichment. However, this alternate path also raises thought-provoking questions. Would the Ming dynasty have been able to sustain the resources and political will required to maintain such vast explorations? Could the encounter between Chinese and European civilizations have led to conflicts or collaboration? And how might the power dynamics between East and West have evolved differently? These are questions that remind us of the delicate balance in historical moments and how small shifts can ripple across centuries. With that in mind, the story of the Ming treasure fleet is not just a testament to human ambition and curiosity, but also a poignant reminder of how decisions made by nations can steer the destiny of the world. Now, as we look ahead, let us delve into yet another fascinating historical turning point. What if the Soviet Union had landed on the moon first?